Showtime!
It's about that time.
Let's go!
You're right where you need to be. This is GCOM Radio.
Hardest radio station on the planet. Yeah!
Powered by Lyfeblood.com.
We certified.
And hosted by Nova Phoenix.
Give them that flavor.
Okay, all right, folks. What is going on? Man, it's good to speak to you guys. My apologies once again. I've been backed up a little bit, dealing with some business, but a lot of with personal stuff. So I said I was going to drop this one like last week. I said I was going to drop it this week, but I kind of got pushed back on some things. But I'm here with you guys now. How has everything been? Hopefully it's been glorious since the last time I've dropped a show for you. Actually, I'm going to double up. This is one that's going to be a particular a special little piece on the Great Replacement, as everybody knows, with the Buffalo shooting that happened some week and some days. But I'm going to do a little 25-30 minute just to talk about it a little bit on that. So and plus I'm going to come up with the next GCOM radio show on some other things. So my bad for being a little bit behind on this show. But yeah, let's talk about the main thing. And I was like, let me just leave it in this particular show on one topic, and of course that has to do with the Buffalo shooting. I've seen a lot of news that was going on talking about the Great Replacement. But first and foremost, let me just say condolences to the family who lost loved ones on that super tragic day. My heart goes out to everyone. You just want to do a little shopping, some everyday mundane things that we all do, and all of a sudden someone comes in with a rifle and kills people. Now, I didn't want to see the video because I didn't really want to subject myself to that type of, the visuals. But, I ended up seeing a piece of it. And because this white supremacist killer, his name was Peyton Gendron, I think that's how you pronounce his last name, went into the top supermarket and shot and killed 13 people and killed 10. This gentleman was born and raised in Conklin, New York. And he traveled all the way, and I think he was born and raised in Conklin. And he went all the way to Buffalo, New York, to a supermarket that I guess he was casing. I think they did say that he was in that supermarket before, and he killed so many people because he had something against black people. He was a white supremacist, full on 100%, 160%. He was dedicated to the ideology of white supremacy, of that whiteness is better than all other people with melanated skin. So the news was talking about a little something in terms of the Great Replacement. That's the big phrase that's being used, associated with Peyton Gendron's act by killing white people, and trying to understand the mentality of an individual such as this. Now, Payne, he drew up a 180-page manifesto. They said a lot of nonsense, a lot of different craziness. I would love to see. Of course, they don't really post anything, and I was trying to look up what he was saying, and I'm hoping they would post some pieces of this freaking manifesto. But all I saw was quotes from people that I guess got bits and pieces of this manifesto. It's a lot of 180 pages. And it's feelings on black and Latino people, talking about white folks are being replaced, of course, Jews being ahead of this plan, and agreeing with Brenton Harrison Tarrant, who killed 51 people that attended a mosque in March 2019. I think, if I'm correct, I want to get the right place here. Let me see here. Let me see, Brenton Harrison. I can't. I forgot the. It didn't happen in the United States. In New Zealand, it happened in New Zealand. So he killed 51 people who were attending a mosque, and it's terrible, terrible. But he did have that in his manifesto. And the wild thing was, when I'm reading up the stories behind this, that, you know, he was hanging out with, he had friends that were, you know, Latino, a friend that you hung out all the time with and shot his guns. And he was Latino, and this Latino man had a black girlfriend, and they were interviewing the journalists from a lot of different online publications, major news sites. Were interviewing the Latino man, the black girlfriend, and they were totally shocked. I tell you, shocked that this man thought this way, and they never knew that he would commit something as dangerous as this. And I question that, because someone that has this type of thought process, that thinks the way that he does, and brings himself to the act of taking human lives for the simple fact of them being black. You know, it just doesn't, like, you don't switch over, like, you're so cool with your Latino quote unquote friend and your quote unquote his black girlfriend, and then all of a sudden you switch over and you're like, you know, I'm going to kill black people because I just didn't like black people. It just don't happen like that. I personally think they're just covering up their tracks, and I think they had their own anti-black sentiment as well. That probably came off, you know, just like in small talk or talking about specific topics while they were playing video games or hanging out drinking beer or shooting their guns or wherever they were shooting their guns. And yes, I did say anti-black sentiment, especially when it comes to the quote-unquote black girlfriend. Yes, black people can have anti-black sentiment, as everybody knows in America, because if you live long enough in this country and you're subjected to the same education and socialization as everybody else who lives within the border of these United States of America, you are going to be subjected to a lot of bias, a lot of stereotypes, a lot of racism that puts black people in a terrible, inferior, seemingly inferior light. And black people watch the radio and listen to news right along with the rest of the population of America. They're subjected to it too, and they take on those same anti-black sentiments. And when you find that one black individual in a group of white folks or in an all-white town, usually, more than likely, they're going to have anti-black sentiment, and they have a certain level of self-hate. And they go along to get along with the group. And if that group, as I said, is in a mostly white town, you best believe, especially if they're grown up there in their 20s and 30s, you best believe that they're going to have anti-black sentiment and just go along with the crowd. Yeah, and like I said, when the news interviewed them, they totally ditched them. They had no idea they were playing along with that game. So, I was going to talk a little bit about the Great Replacement, and, you know, I'm not a psychologist. I'm just a black man that lives in this country for 40 some odd years, and you pick up a lot of things along the way. And I wish I could go a little bit deeper into it, but, you know, in terms of time, you know, I gathered up as much information. I thought about it as much as possible. And, you know, I'm not, a professional, but just giving my 2 cents, just like everybody else that has a podcast. But yeah, the Great Replacement. I mean, it's an old idea that white folks feel that they're being replaced by black folks and POC, and specifically black people, because they have the highest melanin count of all the melanated people around the world. And they felt for a long time, this goes back, and I think, to me, that's been developed over the centuries, when we started to understand the idea of race and how it played into the transatlantic slave trade and trying to socialize black people in this country, Africans in this country, to take on an inferior mentality. So I think that plays along with that whole ideology, that whole thought process of this Great Replacement. And I think it's been developed as Europeans start to really travel and go around the world, and specifically dealing with African people on how they were pretty much a minority of the planet. And I said this before on my podcast, that melanated people make up 85% of this planet. And it's something that you would travel the world in a boat and imagine yourself, and you're out there exploring, and you're going along the coast of West Africa, and then you're going to the region called India before it was called India. Of course, all these names that we're familiar with were names that Europeans gave. So, I mean, even in that sense, if you think about it one level deeper, all these names that we know of specific regions in Africa, in India, in China, like, unless we know definitively from someone in that field that China is named China because it comes from a Mandarin, rooted in a Mandarin name. But, you know, as far as we know, we don't know the real true name of that area where Asian people live in. So, and I think that's been developed over centuries. My thing, I came along a book many years ago. I say in my early 20s, I read the ISIS papers, and the ISIS papers kind of breaks down psychologically why white folks feel this way about the Great Replacement and feel like they're going to be erased off the face of this earth. And the ISIS Papers was a book by Frances Cress Welsing. She's a psychiatrist. She got a bachelor's of science from Antioch College, I think, in Ohio, and she got her MD from Howard U. She pursued her career in child and general psychiatry. She spent the next 25 years working as a staff physician for DC's Department of Human Services. And then she was also a clinical director of two schools catering to children with emotional troubles. She later opened up her own practice and focused on mental health issues in the black community when black folks deal with racism in America, because she was curious, of course, being a psychologist, and what effect racism has on black people. Excuse me, folks. It's hot today. I worked out. I'm dehydrated, so I'm drinking a little bit of water just to wet the palate. So anyway, she wrote the ISIS Papers, The Keys to the Colors, and it was all about white supremacy and how it operates, and the big question on the why. It details symbolisms of racism embedded in all facets of our society, from the shape of a gun, architectural structures like the Washington Monument, and other hidden meanings behind everyday objects that we see that may have some sort of deeper psychological root when you really want to get down to the nitty gritty on how racism affects our society as a whole from all areas of our society. So when I read this book, there's some, I agree with some things, and other things I was kind of like, because of course, as some people say, and I think this is a great line, when you actually do research and you start building and you're trying to understand different things that happen in society, you kind of got to take information like food. You got to eat the meat and spit out the bones. You're not going to necessarily agree with every single thing, but there's certain things that are going to hit a tone. There's going to be a hammer on a nail where you're going to be like, damn, yeah, that's got a good point. But overall, I think it was a great read, and Dr. Frances Cress Welsing was on something when trying to define or understand why racism is the way that it is. And of course, it's a warped ideology that is obsessed, infatuated with the idea of white folks' genetic rarity of their white skin and their perceived envy or loneliness in a world that's dominated by people that has melanated skin. As I said, when Europeans were heading out and they were just exploring and meeting different people and looking at different lands, of course this thing comes to mind. I'm like, wow, my area, because remember, the whole world was nothing but the regions of where people resided for centuries, and let me say this, people did travel, and it didn't start with Europeans or the Dutch or the English or the French. African people have been traveling for thousands of years before Columbus landed in the Caribbean. Same thing with the Chinese. Chinese built boats and they would travel, but I forgot the emperor at the time, but the emperor decided that China shouldn't travel out, and they kind of stayed where they were at in an isolationist type of point of view. So they didn't venture out like a lot of other people around the planet. I don't know the reach, but at some point China pulled back and said, let's just stay where we're at and kind of build our society where it's been for generations. But of course, Europeans traveled down West Africa, around the Horn of Africa, into India, met Chinese people at some point, traded in silk and other goods and materials. And of course, we all understand the brave new world, that new world where, of course, involving the transatlantic slave trade. So, of course, you meeting all these people and you see that, okay, wow, they don't look like you, from the darkest, blackest of skin to the tan color. And you realize that you're the only one in that world where you resided in Western Europe or Eastern Europe. And you're like, whoa, there's really no others south. I traveled for thousands of miles and I don't see anybody else that really looks like me. So I think from the transatlantic slave trade, when it started around in the 16th century, the way white supremacy was built, a lot of it comes from the fact that they are the minorities of the world. And they started to really have, to me, a building of an insecurity, but also in order to destabilize and destroy the minds of the people in order to enslave them, you have to create this framework of superiority and inferiority. And of course, they use race for that. So in the description of what Dr. Francis Cress, so the description of what Dr. Francis Cress Welsing states for what white supremacy is, and I quote, it says, white supremacy is a local and global power system dynamic structured and maintained by those who classify themselves as white, whether consciously or subconsciously determined, which consists of patterns of perception, logic, symbol formation, thoughts, speech, action, and emotional response, as conducted simultaneously in all areas of people's activity in economics, education, entertainment, labor, law, politics, religion, sex, and war, for the ultimate purpose of white genetic survival and to prevent white genetic annihilation on planet Earth. A planet upon which vast and overwhelming majority of people are classified as non-white, meaning black, brown, red, yellow, and all of the non-white people are genetically dominant in terms of skin coloration compared to the genetic recessive white skinned people. Unquote. Now, of course, when people hear the word dominant, they're going to take it as in terms of strength and power, and not in that sense in how we're using this word dominant. Dominant just means in abundance in terms of melanin in the skin, and of course recessive, because white skin is in a scientific sense recessive, that is not dominant, and I get into that a little bit of that later. So black folks and people of color, to me, in ways where we can nullify white supremacy, and I think that's a later conversation, and by doing three things. In order for us to combat white supremacy in its most efficient way possible, I think it boils down to three things, and I read in a lot of articles, and I'm going to take it from this individual that did say this. Is you got to have a level of understanding of the phenomenon of white supremacy. You got to understand the history, the function, the intention of white supremacy. B, the evolution of the self and group respect within your own people. And I'm going to go into a little bit to that deeper. And C, the willing determination and discipline to practice appropriate counter-racist behavior on the part of white non-victims of white supremacy. So you have to actively go after racism and white supremacy and attack whatever that you have actually allowed yourself to believe over the years as you've been exposed to it as a child, as a young adult, into old age. Because if you do not do that, you'll be surprised how much of your actions is determined by these ideas that you let slip into your subconscious mind. And I say the evolution of self and group respect. You got to have a certain understanding of who you are in terms of your past, who you are now, and where you're going. And that's all in your tradition. That's all in your ritual, and how you can build a certain level of self-determination and pride within yourself in order to combat this disease of white supremacy. And all groups of people are exposed to it. Black people can be anti-black. Latinos can be anti-black. Indians could be anti-black. White people, of course, the source of white supremacy, not all white people, but the few that develop that ideology. There are those that are even white people in terms can be victims of white supremacy, and they don't even know it. There are degrees, or you can have, of course, you can have the Buffalo Killer, all right, this gentleman by his name Peyton Gendron, who took it to the next level, and that's the ultimate level that you can act on when it comes to this ideology of white supremacy. But they're also a little bit more passive aggressive, behaviors because of your certain idea of who you think these people to be, whether it's black, brown, or whoever it is. It happens in the office, it happens in entertainment, it happens in news, in all facets of society. You can, if you are introduced or you in the space of white supremacy, it will always manifest itself in different ways. So there are degrees of racism. One second. Okay. Excuse me. So that's why you have to have an evolution in self and group respect in order to combat that. And you have to be willing, determined, and disciplined to go and fight against white supremacy. You can't be like, oh, white supremacy is there. No. You have to actively root it out. Just in the same way where white supremacy was developed to have this power dynamic of superiority and inferiority, and how it bleeds into every facet of our society, on television, on news, everything, and you're constantly barraged with it. You have to face it with that same amount of fervor and what's the word I'm looking for? That same amount of fervor and action as how white supremacy is forced on you. So there are things that I agreed with, and some things I didn't agree with in the book. And I was like, okay, maybe, I don't know. And that's just me as an individual. Other people may agree with it. As I said, you got to eat the meat and spit out the bones. But there are a couple of things that I walked away from this book that Dr. Francis Cress Welsing did create. And there's three things. Now, one thing is fear of the black body. You have to dive deep into racism. You will ultimately find a developed inferiority complex based on this false perception of the limited ability of expanding their genetic traits throughout the planet. I think this idea is a cousin to albinism. Everybody knows that albinism is a rare disease that comes out of any melanated person, where your skin is pale white. Sometimes your eye color can be pink. You can't really take the sun. I think there's some. I believe there's some slight mental. If I'm correct, slight mental. I wouldn't say retardation. I wouldn't say that, but that's something that's associated with albinism. And I could be wrong there, because I don't know all the characteristics of albinism, but I know, of course, where it comes from, people of color, black folk. So this insecurity that they're the only ones on this planet that are not melanated, I think this in turn creates hatred and fear that they will be no more. I think fear of disappearance, anger of melanated people imposing their genetic abundance over their existence, and to them it has to be controlled. It has to be dominated in the same way, kind of the same psychologically how we feel with nature, that nature has to be controlled. It has to be pushed back, pushed at bay, so a world can be created where we can have this concrete jungle, the society that we see today. And I'm loosely basing on that, but it's kind of, I think they're distant cousins to each other. And I'm just thinking about that now. But that the way that these melanated have to be controlled and pushed back and kept at bay in order to maintain their existence on this planet. And this is why POCs are hated and why black bodies are hated the most, because black folks being the darkest and most threatening to white bodies in this white mentality of white supremacy. And we see that, for example, as far as light-skinned people being accepted at jobs, places of gathering, entertainment, anywhere where people gather. Light-skinned people are always accepted when it comes into the white circles. Best, of course, as we know, if you white, you right. If you yellow, you mellow. If you brown, you down. But if you black, get back. You know that saying? It's the same aspects. And that also deals with Asians and Latinos, light-skinned Latinos. The what you call it, the model minority, that whole stupid trope where, okay, Asians are smart people. We're not all races. Certain other tan people are cool. They could be around us, so we can't be racist. But we know that always consistently plays a part in the job circle, when in wherever their white spaces they're at, especially in the job circle. Of course, the Asians being smarter and Indian people being smarter, and you can't be racist. Of course not. Okay. And also the fear created on these news channels. Of course, black people being criminals, they're deviants, the black on black crime excuse, he's athletic but not really smart, the obsession with black incivility. That again plays into the white supremacist mind. That's why in a lot of ways we have, in terms of rappers, that, the quote unquote gangster rappers get the most attention, get the most rotation on radio, get the most spin on television, the most spin everywhere. It's in your face. But as soon as you have a rapper like, say, what's his name? Kendrick Lamar. Or you have a rapper like, I forgot this guy's name, man. I can't believe I forgot this dude's name. He's from Chicago rapper. What's his name? Yeah, Chance the Rapper. There you go, Chance the Rapper. Chance the Rapper is really not a gangster rapper. He just does what he does. He has an art in putting words and lyrics and metaphors together, and he's very talented. But for some reason, you have a lot of these gangster rappers get the most play. The rappers that speak the most violence, the most decadence, the craziest wilding out, like how back in the day with niggas with attitude, that was accepted in white society. Excuse me. White supremacy is obsessed with black incivility because that's what they have always felt, and it goes back decades of how they view black bodies. A second thing that I took with Dr. Francis Cress Welsing's book is their sexual obsession and penis envy. White supremacy is just not based on fear, but it's also based on lust. I believe that the black male is of high virility. He's a sexual beast. He can conquer as many women as possible, because and the darker you are, the more of a sexual deviant you are, or in terms of criminality, the more of a criminal you may be. So there's a psychological connection between genetic dominance and sex drive. They're one and the same. This deformed idea that black men and women were animalistic in sexuality. Black women would jump at advances of men, and men would overwhelm white women in the bedroom, right? The difference. And it's funny, I saw this video on IG where I see this black woman. I just started following this profile. So I forgot the name, I forgot the name of it. So this black woman is there on, it turns out I found out that it was a boat, but before I thought it was a boat, all I could see, she was dancing and there was a crowd of people behind her, and this white man comes behind her and lifts her dress, lifts this black woman's dress, and she's looking at the camera like, did he just do that? And like, oh my God. So yeah, that was crazy. And I'm like, huh? So I saw the video again and again and again, and I'm like, oh, wait a second. She's a single black woman in a white crowd on a boat. And it's crazy, right? Talking about black people, boats, and yeah, but so she inserted herself into this party, and to me, I've always seen this. When you are the minority in the party, when there's 1 or 2 black people and you have 50 white folks in the party, you will always have one white person that's going to be a little bit extra with a black body in the room, especially when it's a man-woman scenario, and a man is trying to push up on a black woman. He's always a extra. I mean, this is beyond extra, to the damn near violation of what happened to that black woman in that boat, where he literally lifted her dress and was trying to rub up on her to the music and everything like that. And I'm surprised she ain't slapped the hell out of him, but it is what it is. But I've seen that constantly in every scenario. So they always feel that black men have this high virility and they're going to dominate as much women as possible. And in black women, they're always accepts the advances, no matter how over the top, because that's what black women should expect, and that's what they should accept. Even back in slavery times, when black women were being exploited and raped, it goes back as far as then. They were even in terms of creating babies. They were there to be breeded and taking black males and breeding black women, and then they were there to raise the next working class circle of the slave master. It goes back then to the most devious levels. And then, of course, you would also have the slave master's wives running off into the slave quarters to get a piece of the black male. It goes back to that. We also can remember the first major blockbuster movie that expressed these same sick ideas back in the 1915 film Birth of a Nation that was directed by D.W. Griffith. It was directly linked to the rise of the KKK at the time. Black men were the enemies, and they were looking to rape and violate white women. Pornography is another example where you see this expressed. Of course, everybody understands pornography is a space where they can live out their wildest sexual deviant fantasies. And you can see that in, of course, the different selections, the different topics as most viewed on porn. Of course, the BBC, the big black cock situation. You see the men as still in that same scenario, ravaging and dominating white women. Whenever you look at interracial sex on porn sites, interracial sex always means black men and white women. That's all you see when you see interracial sex. What pops up is black men with white women. And at the same time, this only increases their security and fear in real life. Their lust on pornography to see black males dominating white women, but yet at the same time, it builds up their insecurity and fear in real life. The only way they handle their insecurity is not to have black men in that same room or put them in subservient roles. It comforts their ego and it reassures their place of control. Eventually, let me tell you, be in a room with white men and a black man, and then let a white woman walk into the room. It is consistent. I shit you not. I'm telling you the truth. Everything is fine when you're talking about work, you're talking about the game, you're talking about what you did over the weekend. When that comes to that black man, that single black man in a room of 7, 8 white men, everything is cool. Jamal is cool. Let a white woman walk into the room, the energy changes. The energy changes, even when it's totally innocent. People look a little more. They're analyzing what's the body reaction between that white woman and that black man. It's crazy. It's absolutely crazy. I'm telling you. Even today, we see in movies where black men are seen as social deviants. They're seen as pimps, womanizers, woman beaters. Black male hypersexualization can be seen in blaxploitation movies back in like the 1973, The Mac, 1974, Willie Dynamite, 1972, Superfly, 1975, Mandingo, and of course you see with black women in 1974, Foxy Brown. In major films today, you don't see black men and white women relationships on the big screen. It does not happen. It does not happen. You may see it on porn. You'll see it as in terms of black men dominating white women or multiple black men on one white woman. But it's crazy when you bring it up out of pornography into the mainstream on the big screen. When you see interracial couples, what do you see? White men and black women, white men and Asian women, white men and Latino women. So you see the insecurity with these white males producing these films, which in turn means they cater to the white male population's insecurity when it comes to interracial images that you see on the big screen. It'll never be the other way around. I said this before. There's also white supremacy plays into when it comes to sexuality. I said also about homosexuality. Homosexuality is accepted, and this is nothing against the homosexual and the LGBT communities, nothing against them. You live how you live. But in the heterosexual world, white males are more comfortable with homosexual black men. As I said, when it comes to working at a job, any spaces where there are the multitude of white men, white males are more, they feel safer when, and the more flamboyantly gay you are, the more comfort they feel. You know, I forgot the gay black man. Let me see, gay actors. He's everywhere. He's in the he's at all the shows. Let me see if I can find this guy. Here, there you go. Billy Porter. That's his name. Billy Porter. Love Billy Porter's everywhere. He's everywhere. They love this guy. He's on. He has the magnificent dresses on. Beautiful. They love Billy Porter. They love him. It makes white men comfortable. Some white men. Let me not say all, because I'm not here to generalize. Those that have white supremacist ideologies, they love Billy Porter. And for those that have white supremacist ideologies, they love them in workspaces. That's why you have more gay people at certain places. They don't want the big black strapping black man. And it's funny, the only time where you consistently see black men that are big and strong and strapping is when it comes to security. They can be at the door. Not a problem, because that's essentially what they're doing. They're scaring away all the criminals. But as far as anybody that works on the inside and you have staff that are white women, you will not have someone that is in there, unless the only time you have a black man in there, if it's a gay black male. The more flamboyant, the better. It makes them comfortable in their own insecurity. And also you have to deal with the one drop rule, which is associated with white supremacy. Of course, it goes back into slavery times. It was later codified into law in the early And also you have to think about the one drop rule. It started back in slavery times, and it was later codified into law in the early 20th century, such as the 1924 Racial Integrity Act. It was enacted in Virginia to prohibit race mixing and to reinforce racial hierarchies. That one drop meant you were no longer white. Of course, as we deal with mulattoes and the quadroons and all that, one little bit of black blood in you, you're not with the family. Okay, you could be in the slave house, in the slave master house, but the dark you are, of course, you got to be in the field. You got to be out there. It's proximity. So it comes down to white genetic annihilation. When you take the time to understand racism and what comes out from it, of the fear of black bodies, the hypersexualization of black males, you come to understand where this great replacement theory comes from through the mouths of Tucker Carlson and all the other conversations spoken in gentler ways from far-right people on the news. It's all because of how some white males feel about their place in the world and how they see themselves moving around in it. This psychosis creates the actions that you see today. You see it, and of course, in Charlottesville, Virginia, where Jews will not replace us. Remember that time? You will not replace us. That is a direct evidence of this great replacement theory that they have in this white supremacist mind. The more severe cases coming from the far right and their obsession with abortion. You see it in the draconian laws across America, where women are being criminalized when they want to have an abortion. Especially when it comes to rape and incest, that's acceptable. That's cool. There's no problem. Doctors will be charged in jail. It is utter madness what is happening. That is a direct result of this idea of white genetic annihilation in a white supremacist mind. Even when it comes to anti-immigrant policies, turning away black and brown immigrants. Some cases, they'll keep the brown immigrants, but they'll kick out the black immigrants. But the door is open wide for white immigrants. It's not a problem. You're cool even if you're from the Middle East or if you're Ukrainian. You're sure you could come right in, no problem. That's directly linked to this idea of white genetic annihilation, the great replacement, and which is seated within a white supremacist viewpoint. Of course, the lone gunman mass shooting that targets black folk up in Buffalo, and all of it is interconnected and comes from the warped mindset of white supremacists that are obsessed with the centuries-old idea of race in America and around the world. Unfortunately, white supremacy is global. It's not just in white societies, but it's also been taught, as I said before earlier, in black and brown countries that don't have the tools to understand the overlying functions and the underlying nuances of racism. A lot of our African brothers and sisters on the continent have no idea, don't understand why they think racism is gone, slavery is over. I'm saying some of our brothers and sisters on the continent, and they feel we got to move on when white supremacy is still playing out in the countries that they have today. Why their economy is destroyed, why things are in disarray, why there's so many unemployed black people in South Africa. All of that plays a part, and white supremacy still has its claws around certain countries in Africa. These are all acts that create, perpetuate, and exacerbate the ongoing ideas and systems of white supremacy, everything that I spoke about. The killings, the keeping the darkest skinned people at bay, far away, or totally eliminating them. Destroying or denigrating them by constantly pushing these stereotypes on TV, on radio. All of these things are used to continue with this idea that white is right and black is the devil. Now, I have to say, not all white folks are white supremacists. A lot of them even see what they've been exposed to and work hard trying not to be a part of that white supremacist ideology. But there are a lot of white Americans, unfortunately. Even Jesse, what's his name? Jesse. He even said that. He said in a piece, Jesse Williams, actor. Let me see if I'm right. Yeah, Jesse Williams. He even said in a piece on video that he was being recorded by, he says, if you were born in America, raised in America, it's more than likely you have racist ideas. He said, no doubt about it. If you're born in America, it's impossible not to escape racist ideology as you're coming up to be a young adult in America. And if you don't actively root it out, then you will be victim to that, or you can be the actor to it. Push it forward and be well aware of it. So white supremacy has to be rooted out and destroyed. It has to be actively rooted out, seeked out, and eliminated. There's no other ways I could use for that. Obliterated. So yeah, that's my piece on this great replacement thing. Hopefully, if you see eye to eye with it, that's great. If you don't see eye to eye with it with me, that's fine. I encourage everyone to read the ISIS Papers from Dr. Francis Cress Welsing. Everyone should get a read of that book. And of course, you're not going to agree with everything, but it definitely puts people on the road to try to understand why racism is and how do we destroy it. All right, folks, I'm going to get out of here. We're going to follow up with another show, GCOM Radio, I think episode 156 in a couple of days. And so I can just catch up with you guys. So I'm out. Thanks for listening. Hopefully I didn't bore you guys too much. Hopefully I didn't piss off too much. But you know what? If I did piss off people, I guess I'm doing a good thing. So anyway, I'm out of here, folks. Thank you for listening. All right, peace.
Yo, check it.
You just listened to GCOM Radio, powered by Lyfeblood.com for the global community.
We worldwide, baby.
See you in the next go round. From right here to your town, we out.